Bread. You're allowed to eat bread Friday night. You're allowed to eat bread Shabbos morning until the time you can't eat bread on an eve of Pesach. And therefore, indeed, the Mishnah Berurah says, "Nahagu b'kama mekomot b'medinatenu shachar tefillah ochlim ma'achalim karim shel CHAMETZ." Indeed, the Mishnah Berurah says that many people, after davening, up until the time you can't, eat cold CHAMETZ. They don't warm it up because the house is kosher for Pesach, but they eat cold CHAMETZ. So it seems like it's obviously an option. However, even though it's an option, you have to be careful about three things. Number one, as I mentioned, you have to finish it by the time that CHAMETZ is forbidden on Shabbos morning, which means you have to get up pretty early. And ultimately, if that's the case, then obviously davening will be earlier, and the second meal of Shabbos with washing, Kiddush, will be earlier. Number two, you have to make sure, obviously, not to warm them up and not to put them anywhere near the Pesach food, because if you do, you got a very big problem. If you warm them up on your plata, on your hot plate, on your blech, you have a huge problem because you cannot kasher on Shabbos, and you have CHAMETZ probably stuck to it. And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch paskins regarding any Shabbos, that you're allowed to go ahead and wash dishes, but after Shalosh Shudas you can't. Why? Because the bottom line is, there's no reason for it and there's no use for it. Thus, says the Shulchan Aruch regarding this particular Shabbos, En mebashlim daisa v'chayotze bezeh. You don't make farina and other things like it, meaning in a pot. You don't make toast, namely you don't make your challah hot. And indeed the Ramah says, and if indeed you did so, and there's no way to wash it properly because you can't use a sponge at Shabbos, you can't put it in the dishwasher at Shabbos, you should try to do what you can, like put a little bleach on it, or try to take it off quite carefully with that Shabbos brush, but it's going to be a very big problem. And therefore the Mishnah Berurah says that the bottom line is that anything that sticks to a pot or a pan or a plate, you should not use this particular Shabbos coming up, because, and I quote his lovely words, and he says it explicitly, because you don't need it that day, you're not allowed to wash it. It's called hachana mikodesh l'chol. And therefore, the bottom line is, if you want to use bread, what you better do is go ahead, make sure it's not warmed up anywhere near the kitchen, and obviously eat it, a bread that doesn't make a lot of crumbs. My suggestion, pitot. But even if you do so, you don't want to eat it on the Pesach dishes, so therefore you should make hamotzi away from the table, but in sight of your table, because, not because of Hilchos Pesach, not because of Hilchos Shabbos, but because of Hilchos Brachos. In Hilchos Brachos, we have a law that says that if you're Moshech Yado min hapat, if you go ahead and you no longer need the bread, maybe you have to make brachos on everything else at the meal. We usually think that once you make hamotzi, there's no need for other brachot, but that's only if the bread's on the table and you can eat it. In this case, you're going to make hamotzi away from the table, and you're not going to touch the bread while you eat your kosher for Pesach Friday night and Shabbos morning meal. So maybe it's a problem of Moshech Yado min hapat. If it is, as the Shulchan Aruch says, we would have to make brachot on everything else we eat at the meal. A shahakol before we eat the chicken, a borei pri adama before we eat the potatoes. Is that indeed the case if we're going to eat bread away from the table and not at the table? The truth of the matter is, I don't think so. Though the Biur Halacha does bring a point of view that says it is a problem, it seems to me that it's not such a big problem, and that is because of a combination of two things. Number one, the Biur Halacha brings another point of view that you need akirat hashulchan. You need to take the table away physically to be in a status of moshech yado min hapat. Namely, you're no longer going to touch that bread at all. That's not the case. We leave the table in place. And number two, the Rashba. The Rashba, quoted by the Biur Halacha, says that at the end of the day, that law only applies for dessert, but things that are part of the meal, such as meat, potatoes, and other things, then that law would not apply to. However, just to be machmir on this question, if you're going to use bread, my advice is that you eat the bread and make hamotzi in sight of the table, but away from the table. And the last bite you eat at the table. This way, there's not a problem, because you did eat bread at the table. You have to say you're moshech yado min hapat. You're staying away from the bread if you actually ate it at the table, albeit the last piece, not every piece of bread. Ad kan, the bread option for Lechem Mishneh, which will only work Friday night or Shabbos morning. God willing, tomorrow we'll deal with the egg matzah option.
Seine Floh, was doin leist der